All right, let's start far away from here in the Pacific, in Fiji, where the Secretary General today addressed the Pacific Island Forum and told Pacific leaders that he is there to see the region's climate pressures firsthand and learn about the work being undertaken by communities to bolster their resilience. He said, "I know that Pacific Island communities have been responding actively to today's hardship and tomorrow's dangers. You are drawing on a long history of adaptation and traditional ecological knowledge." He praised the region's governments for challenging the status quo and being at the forefront of global climate negotiations. The Secretary General also spoke about the need to tackle marine pollution and stressed that we have the blueprints, frameworks, and plans. What we need is urgency and ambition, will and ambition. He said that this is why he is convening his climate summit in September, and said he wants the summit to demonstrate the benefits of climate action and how we can all benefit. The Secretary General reiterated the UN's commitment to supporting the Pacific Islands' response to climate change and reversing the negative trends that have put their cultures and very existence at risk. And he also tweeted out his support and welcoming the pledge made by Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, to bring Germany to make sure that Germany was carbon-free by 2050. The Secretary General also held a joint press conference with the Pacific Island Forum Troika, which is made up of the presidents of Nauru, the Prime Minister of Samoa, and the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, as well as the Forum Secretary General. He emphasized that the joint message from the Pacific is not one of generosity, but of determination. What we ask for is not solidarity, it's generosity. It is enlightened self-interest from all decision makers around the world, because it is not only the Pacific that is at stake, but the whole planet, he said. All of his remarks have been shared with you. And on the margins of the forum, the Secretary General also met a number of leaders from the region. Tomorrow, he will address the Fijian Parliament and speak to youth at the University of the South Pacific. I have been asked in recent days about the different developments in the Gulf, and I can say that the Secretary General is following with growing concern recent incidents and hardening rhetoric in the Gulf region, which threaten to further destabilize an already volatile situation. In particular, he condemns the recent attacks on commercial vessels off the coast of the United Arab Emirates and stresses the need for further investigation to determine the facts and hold accountable the perpetrators. He also condemns the drone attack on oil facilities in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for which the Houthi have claimed responsibility. The Secretary General recalls that attacks targeting civilian infrastructure violate international humanitarian law. The Secretary General calls upon all actors to exercise maximum restraint and prevent any escalation amid heightened tensions. I wanted to update you on the status of our colleague Moncef Kartas since the previous statement of April 12, 2019, with regard to the arrest and detention by Tunisian authorities of Moncef Kartas, a member of the Security Council's panel of experts on Libya. The government of Tunisia provided the organization with documents concerning the prosecution of Mr. Kartas by the Tunisian authorities. Following a careful review of the documents, the United Nations formally notified the government of Tunisia that it is reaffirmed the immunities enjoyed by Moncef Kartas in relation to the legal proceeding against him in Tunisia, and requested Mr. Kartas's immediate release and for the charges against him to be dropped. The United Nations remains very concerned by the continued detention and prosecution of Mr. Kartas by the Tunisian authorities, which is in violation of the privileges and immunities that have been granted to Mr. Kartas in the interests of the United Nations. The organization calls upon the government of Tunisia to release Mr. Kartas immediately. The United Nations will continue to engage with the government on this serious matter. Turning to Libya, our colleagues at the UN Migration Agency report that since early April, nearly 70,000 people have been displaced as a result of the clashes in and around Tripoli, while another 100,000 are sought to remain in the frontline areas amid rapidly deteriorating conditions. Some 3,300 refugees and migrants are trapped in detention centers that are already exposed to or in close proximity to the fighting. Access to food, water, health care is severely restricted at these facilities as a result of the conflict. And back here, as you will have seen, Martin Griffiths, the special envoy for Yemen, told Security Council today that between the 11th and the 14th of May, Ansar Allah have undertaken an initial deployment of forces from the ports of Al Hudaydah, Salif, and Ras Isa under UN monitoring. He said that General Michael Lolosgaard and his team from the UN mission to support the Hudaydah agreement were there at each of the three ports to monitor and verify the redeployments. The military forces of Ansar Allah have now left the three ports, Al Hudaydah, Salif, and Ras Isa, he confirmed. Mr. Griffiths told Council members that it is only the beginning and these redeployments must be followed by concrete actions of the parties to deliver under their obligations under the Stockholm Agreement. Emergency Relief Coordinator Mark Lowcock also briefed the Council, warning that the specter of famine still looms. He said that 10 million Yemenis are still reliant on emergency food assistance to survive. He added that a resurgent cholera outbreak has affected nearly 300,000 people this year, compared to 337,000 in the whole of 2018. The fighting also impacts aid operations. Mr. Lowcock said that because many main routes are not suitable, travelers, humanitarian agencies, and traders now rely on a patchwork of back roads and mountain passes, often going through insecure areas with numerous checkpoints. The UNICEF Executive Director, Henrietta Fore, told Council members that since the fighting in Yemen began 4 years ago, 7,300 children have been killed or seriously injured. Each day, she said, another 8 children will be killed, injured, or recruited in the fighting. Every 10 minutes, another child will die from a preventable disease, she told Council members. Those remarks have been shared with you. And as a reminder that at 3 p.m. today, General Lolosgaard will be briefing you by video conference from Hudaydah to give you the latest on the situation in Yemen. Turning to Sudan, the African Union UN hybrid operation in Darfur has condemned an incident that took place yesterday in Al Geneina super camp in West Darfur, where an unruly crowd forcefully entered the camp, looting UN property and contingent-owned equipment, vandalizing premises, and putting the lives of UN staff and personnel at grave risk. The crowd and looters included individuals in government of Sudan police and military uniforms. The mission said these acts constitute a blatant violation of international norms governing the presence of UN peacekeepers around the world. The mission's joint representative, Jeremiah Mamabolo, called on the relevant authorities to bring to account the uniformed personnel alleged to have taken part in this looting. The mission has dispatched troop reinforcements to the area to strengthen the protection arrangements ahead of the planned handover of the camp to the government of Sudan, which took place earlier today. The full statement is online. And this year's meeting of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction is now underway in Geneva. In a video message to the gathering, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, said the need to tackle climate change and disaster risk reduction is growing by the day, and so is the public's call for action. She said that climate change is helping to drive the rise of extreme weather events, which in turn is upending jobs, threatening sources of food and water, and devastating lives. Ms. Mohammed also stressed that the proliferation of disasters is undermining the efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And at 2 p.m. today, there will be a press briefing by the UN Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, for the release of the State of Commodity Dependency Report 2019. Speakers will include Pamela Koch-Hamilton, Director of UNCTAD's Division on International Trade and Commodities, Yanchun Zhang, Chief of UNCTAD's Commodities Branch, and Chantal Carpentier, Chief of UNCTAD's New York office. Then at 3 p.m., as I mentioned, General Lolosgaard will be speaking to you by VTC from Yemen. And to cap off the date, 4:30 p.m., there'll be a briefing by Ambassador Samuel Moncada, the permanent representative of Venezuela to these United Nations. Monsieur.
Stéphane, on Kartas, can you tell us if Tunisia asked to have for a lift of his immunity?
I'm not going to go into the details of what they've asked. They provided us information regarding their reasoning for his detention. Our position, I think, could not be clearer. We're asking for his immediate release and reaffirming the fact that the privileges and immunities afforded to him stand. Masoud.
Thank you, Stéphane. Stéphane, on this Middle East, the tensions in the Gulf, Persian Gulf, or the Arabian Gulf, can you again tell us whether Iran is abiding by the nuclear agreement? And what does the IAEA say about that?
Well, the IAEA has reporting responsibilities which it fulfills. It issues reports regularly. So I would refer you to the reports that they issue, but I cannot speak for them.
But it is being, the reason why I'm saying it is being goaded towards breaking the deal at all. Is there an effort underway? So that's the reason why I ask. They are still abiding by the deal, right?
We report regularly. The IAEA reports regularly, and I think those reports are available for all to see. Let's go to the right, and then we'll go to the left.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, does Secretary General have any comments on the results of the Pompeo-Lavrov meeting? Thank you.
No particular comment. Said that we obviously are always encouraging dialogue. Sir.
Yes. Could you describe, at least in general terms, what the charges are that have been leveled by the Tunisians?
No, that's for the Tunisian government to talk about. From our standpoint, we do not believe he should be detained. We believe the charges against him should be dropped and that he should be released.
But they have, obviously, UN officials have reviewed. You said their reasoning. Can you describe at least the substance of the charges so that an evaluation can be made whether the allegations are outside the scope of immunity protection?
We've made our evaluation. I think you should speak to the Tunisian authorities to get details on the charges they are holding him under. Monsieur, and then we'll go to Madame.
You have probably seen that the State Department is withdrawing non-essential diplomatic personnel from Iraq. This comes in the context of growing tension between the US and Iran. How concerned is the Secretary General about escalation and or miscalculation?
I think the Secretary General is following with growing concern. I think the recent rise in rhetoric that we have seen, the hardening of rhetoric that we've seen, the incidents that we have seen, it is a very volatile region. And I think an increase in rhetoric, an increase in incidents can only lead to further destabilizing this area of the world. Carla.
Thank you. Does the Secretary General have any comment on the recently concluded PrEPCOM for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty? Almost everyone that I spoke to seems to think there has been no progress, and according to the closing statement on behalf of 46 organizations in 60 countries, the dangers of war among nuclear-armed states are real and growing, and there has been regression rather than progress.
I don't have any specific. I haven't seen the final results of the PrEPCOM. What I can tell you is that the Secretary General is a very strong believer in the need for nuclear non-proliferation, for disarmament as a whole, and he would encourage member states to move forward and not backwards. Masoud and then Joe.
Yes. Stéphane, on this recent appeal made by the United Nations for UNRWA, for the Palestinians hurt during the crisis, especially their limbs have been particularly focused by the Israeli IDF. So has that appeal for more funding for UNRWA?
I'll check where UNRWA's funding levels are. Yes, Joe.
Yeah, just on the Global Climate Summit scheduled for September. First of all, can you just again confirm the date? Secondly, have formal invitations been sent out yet?
Yes, invitations have been sent out. We are asking member states to come with concrete proposals and concrete movement. The aim of the summit is to show the political will through concrete action to combat climate change. I mean, as an example, just a recent example is the German Chancellor's statement. And the date is just, I don't have it off the top, I think it's the day before the formal opening of the General Assembly.
And have you received, has the Secretariat received any acceptances, rejections?
I'll check what the status is, but it's still very much early days.
Right.
This is the United Nations. People tend to RSVP for dinners at the last minute. All right, Linda.
Thank you, Steph. This is regarding Burkina Faso.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's been a series of attacks on Christians and the church. I think Monday during a parade. And I was just wondering, since this appears to becoming sort of a systematic way of fighting, I was just wondering what the UN, if the UN has been in contact. Is there anything that the UN is doing?
Sure. I mean, a couple of things. The Secretary General is, I think, extremely worried, as he has said so very vocally, on attacks on religious sites, on attack on people for their religion, whether it's anti-Semitic attacks, Islamophobic attacks on Christians, as we've just seen again in Burkina Faso. He has tasked Mr. Mortinos, the head of the Alliance of Civilization, to work with member states on the protection of holy sites, and Mr. Mortinos is doing just that. But this is also linked obviously to the rise of hate speech that we're seeing around the world, and targeting people for who they are or what they may believe in. Thank you. No, Monica. You're welcome to stay, but there will be no second part.